Welcome back to Mastering Defence Infrastructure, DECnet Pro members, and anyone tuning in on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're thrilled to have you with us as we tackle yet another critical topic in defence project management.
Absolutely, Darian. And hey, if you're new here, don't stress. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but we'll make it accessible for everyone, whether you're just starting out or you've been managing defence projects for years.
Right, and let's quickly get you up to speed. In phase 2 so far, we've explored the DIPRAC framework, that's Defence Infrastructure, Project Risk and Contingency, and unpacked key risk areas like geographic and environmental concerns, stakeholder coordination challenges, and of course, technical and delivery risks. Each one comes with its own unique pitfalls, particularly in defence contexts.
And today we're diving into two risks that don't always get enough attention: contractual risks and information risks. These are kind of sneaky, you know? They're embedded right there in your contracts and project data.
They are often overlooked but massively consequential. Contractual risks include things like liability clauses, fitness for purpose obligations, or unclear definitions that can entirely shift project dynamics. Information risks, on the other hand, tie back to how you collect, store, and interpret critical data throughout a project lifecycle. Overlooking either could derail your timelines, your costs, or both.
And not in a fun way. We're talking about those headaches that creep up because the tiny details weren't caught early enough. But hey, that's why we're here, right? To unpack it all and help everyone navigate these risks better.
Let's start with the topic of contractual risks. Within the Defence Facilities suite of contracts, there are 3 critical clauses that can significantly impact contractors and project owners if they're overlooked or misunderstood. These are the areas where small mistakes or not paying close enough attention can lead to major consequences.
Okay, start with the big one. Unlimited liability. It sounds honestly a bit terrifying.
It can be if you're not careful. Unlimited liability essentially means, there's no cap on the financial consequences if something goes wrong. Let's say a contractor unintentionally causes damage to infrastructure that's part of a classified defence operation. Without limits on liability, the contractor could be on the hook for potentially millions, even billions in damages.
Wait, billions? That's a lot to take in. No wonder it makes contractors super cautious during bids.
Exactly. It drives up pricing significantly because contractors need to protect themselves against those worst case scenarios. And even then, there's still a level of risk they can't fully avoid. Now, compare that to commercial contracts in other industries. These are often capped at, say, 2 or 3 times the contract value. Defence contracts, a different story entirely.
Yeah, that's huge. What about fitness for purpose? That one always feels like a bit of a trap.
It kind of is if it's not defined clearly. Fitness for purpose effectively means that the contractor guarantees the works will fulfill their intended purpose. Now, here's the catch.
There always is one.
There is. If the purpose isn't clearly defined in the contract, you could find yourself locked into what amounts to an open-ended obligation. An example, say you've built a hangar, but later someone decides it should double as a facility for drones. Suddenly, it doesn't meet the new requirements, and you're holding the bag, so to speak.
Ooh, so you just end up footing the bill to make it right?
Pretty much.
That's a nightmare. And it's all because no one pinned down what fitness actually meant up front?
Correct. Getting clarity on roles, responsibilities, and technical specifications early can save so many headaches. Now, on to the third big one, consequential loss. That's another tricky clause because, it excludes what are considered indirect losses. Imagine project delays, lost revenue, reputational damage.
All the knock-on effects, basically.
Exactly. But here's the thing. What's considered indirect versus direct isn't always black and white. Contractors might assume they're off the hook for certain damages, only to find out through litigation they're not. There's a grey area that courts might interpret differently than the parties intended.
So it's less about what the clause says and more about how it could get read later? That's a bit of a gamble, isn't it?
It is, but in some cases, you can negotiate tighter definitions up front or seek to include specific exclusions. Those strategies can make a world of difference down the line.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a roadmap. You're still driving, but at least you know where you're headed.
Exactly. And as we'll see, that's where negotiating tailored risk distribution comes into play. It's not about avoiding risk entirely. It's about being intentional about how you allocate it.
All right, intentional risk allocation. You mentioned that's key. So let's dig into the practical side of it. What strategies can project owners and contractors use to balance these risks effectively?
Good question. One effective approach is through provisional sums and latent conditions clauses. These mechanisms are all about addressing the unknowns in a contract proactively.
Okay, but break that down for us. How do provisional sums actually work?
Sure. Provisional sums are essentially placeholders in your contract budget for items with uncertain scope or cost. Let's say you're excavating and suspect there might be old infrastructure buried underground. Instead of locking in a fixed price, you allocate a provisional sum. If you find something, the cost to address it comes from that reserve. If not, no money spent.
So it's kind of like reserving a just-in-case fund?
Exactly. It gives both parties flexibility and ensures the contractor isn't gambling on unknowns. But here's the kicker. Properly scoping and defining those sums early on is critical, or you risk disputes down the line.
What about latent conditions clauses? Are they in the same ballpark?
They are. Latent conditions deal specifically with what's hidden, literally underground in many cases. Think unexpected asbestos, contaminated soil, or that ancient infrastructure no one knew was there. And these clauses clarify how those risks get shared between the owner and contractor. For fair distribution, you need clear definitions of what qualifies as a latent condition.
Right, so it's about drawing the line on who owns what part of the risk. But what about bigger decisions, like choosing the right procurement model?
Yes, aligning contract terms to actual project certainty is huge. For projects with a lot of unknowns, managing contractor model can make more sense. It puts the focus on collaboration and gives contractors the ability to refine scopes and approach risks iteratively as new information emerges.
And D&C, design and construct. That's the opposite, right? Higher responsibility on the contractor?
Exactly. D&C works best when the project scope is well defined up front. The contractor takes on more risk but has greater control over design outcomes. Ultimately, the trick is matching the procurement model to the level of certainty you have at the outset.
Makes sense. It's like trying to use the right tool for the job rather than forcing it to fit.
Precisely. The more upfront effort you put into getting the right structure and clauses in place, the better equipped you'll be to navigate those inevitable challenges as the project unfolds.
Thinking about everything we just discussed, provisional sums, latent conditions, and matching the right procurement method, it got me wondering about another layer, information risks. Darian, this one feels like the silent sabotage. You don't notice it until things start going wrong.
Exactly, Jessica. Information risks often come from data we assume is complete or accurate, but isn't. Defence infrastructure projects are incredibly complex, and even small gaps can snowball into major issues.
Like asbestos, right? It's the classic example of a hidden problem that can derail projects completely.
Absolutely. Asbestos is a big one. Assume you're rehabilitating an old defence site. The original building survey might say there's no asbestos, but further down the line, say during demolition, you discover fragments buried deep in the soil. Suddenly, your timeline stretches, your costs balloon, and local regulations come into play, adding even more red tape.
And the contamination. Soil contamination is another nightmare. Like, you think it's clean until you're halfway through excavation.
Yes, it can lead to layers upon layers of challenges, from stoppages in construction to expensive remediation processes. It's one of those risks that's rarely solved cheaply or quickly. And these aren't isolated issues. They're shockingly common.
Which brings us to Fee Master, right? That tool sounds like a bit of a game changer for figuring out where the gaps are.
It can be. FeeMaster essentially allows you to assess the quality of the data inputs you're relying on for your project. It's like holding a magnifying glass over the early stages of your planning process. It has a checklist that prompts you to rank how complete, accurate, or outdated your information is, giving you a score to pinpoint weak spots before you even get started.
Wait, really? So you run your project data, it tells you where the problem is, and then what?
That's when you adjust the plan. Think of it as a proactive tool. If it flags issues in geotech reports, for example, you know to investigate further before contractors start mobilizing. The same with environmental baselines. Catching those early means fewer nasty surprises mid-project.
Right, because by then the budgets and timelines are already locked. So fixing it is going to cost way more.
Exactly. The major impact of information gaps is that they ripple across the entire project lifecycle. You could have teams ready to go, machinery in place, and then boom, you hit an unanticipated delay. It drains morale, blows budgets, and undermines project confidence.
And it can even put the project's future in doubt. I've seen examples where things got paused indefinitely because the risks, well, they just kept piling up.
Precisely. Handling information risks early is all about preventative measures. It's much easier to address shortcomings while still in the planning phase. Once dirt hits the shovel, fixing those gaps becomes exponentially harder and costlier.
Yeah, so the moral is don't skimp on the homework up front. It's always worth it in the long run.
Building on what we just discussed about addressing risks early, tools like FeeMaster, you really emphasize the need to gather accurate, comprehensive information as soon as possible. It's all about creating a strong foundation because without it, the entire project can be jeopardized.
Right, so think surveys and testing.
Exactly. Site surveys, environmental testing, geotechnical studies, they're the basics. But you'd be surprised how often people skip these steps or treat them as afterthoughts. Taking shortcuts here can lead to massive oversights.
Yeah, and then you're left scrambling halfway through a project. No thanks. But what else can teams do to stay ahead?
Well, documenting assumptions is key, and anytime you craft a tender or negotiate a contract, it's critical to outline the assumptions you're working under. For example, if your geotech report assumes stable soil conditions but no borehole tests were done, make sure that's explicitly stated in the document. That way, if something unexpected crops up, your position is protected.
So it's all about transparency, spelling out what you know and what you don't know before signing anything.
Exactly. It's a safeguard for both parties, really. Ambiguity is what leads to disputes down the line. So the clearer you are up front, the smoother things go later. But even beyond contracts, this practice builds trust. Clear communication shows that you've done your homework and aren't trying to shift hidden risks onto someone else.
Yeah, it's like saying, here's the full picture. We're all on the same page. It's such a simple step, but it sounds like it can save a lot of drama.
Exactly. It's not just a best practice, it's a project saver. Taking all that into account, let's look at how these principles apply in real life, specifically with Project Ironclad. It's a prime case study for seeing how risks unfold and are managed in complex defence projects.
Okay, quick recap. We've got unlimited liability, fitness for purpose challenges, and some incomplete geotech and contamination data. So where did it all start going wrong?
It really began with the initial contract negotiations. Unlimited liability, for example, should have been capped or better defined from the outset. When you leave an open-ended liability clause, you invite inflated costs because contractors are forced to price for every worst-case scenario.
And those worst case scenarios, they can blow up fast, right? Like you're suddenly dealing with, surprises buried deep in the fine print.
Precisely. Unlimited liability is like carrying an umbrella with no handle. It's not doing much to actually protect you. Negotiating reasonable caps would have shifted the focus to collaboration instead of caution.
What about fitness for purpose? That feels like a classic defence project hurdle.
It is. And the issue here was a lack of specificity. The contract didn't clearly outline what fitness meant for the project. It's a critical step. Use cases and technical requirements need to be spelled out so there's no ambiguity.
Yeah, because otherwise you're left guessing. And if the project scope changes halfway through, contractors are in this weird limbo, trying to make it all fit.
Exactly. For Ironclad, they could have addressed this by involving technical advisors early on to define every potential use case. Fitness for purpose in TIM isn't inherently risky. It's the assumptions and gaps that make it problematic.
And then there's the geotech and contamination data. This one's kind of personal, I think. I've worked on projects where those gaps just snowballed. It's not pretty.
I'm not surprised. Geotech and contamination issues can derail entire timelines if they're not thoroughly investigated up front. For Ironclad, incomplete data delayed decision-making and risked compliance with environmental standards. They should have invested more in early, comprehensive site assessments. Spending more at that stage avoids a minefield of costs later.
So basically, the big takeaway is that everything comes back to upfront effort, yeah? Clarity, definitions, planning, it's just got to happen early.
That's it, Jessica. What you do or don't do in the early stages determines whether your project thrives or stumbles along the way. And Ironclad, it's the perfect illustration of why foresight matters. So, Jessica, as we saw with Project Ironclad, the importance of addressing risks early on, whether it's liability clauses, fitness for purpose definitions, or geotechnical data, can't be overstated. Identifying these issues up front can make all the difference between smooth sailing and a project that's constantly firefighting.
Right. I mean, we've seen it over and over. Projects that invest up front in proper scoping and investigation, they just, I don't know, they run smoother from start to finish.
Exactly, and it's not just about the scoping. Documenting assumptions, engaging the right technical experts, with setting fair contractual terms. These steps lay the foundation for success.
And don't forget collaboration. When you've got transparency and open communication with defense, it's like it smooths out so many bumps in the road, yeah?
Absolutely. Collaboration ensures everyone's working with the same level of understanding. It's the glue that holds these processes together, keeping risks contained and manageable.
Honestly, the biggest headaches? They come when assumptions aren't checked or when people skip the nitty-gritty details. It's always the tiny stuff that causes the biggest dramas later on.
True. Clear documentation, proactive investigation, and is a willingness to go the extra mile early on. That's what pays dividends every single time.
And hey, it's not just about the projects either. It's about building trust, right? Between contractors, project owners, defence. It makes everything less combative in the long run.
Exactly. Risks are inevitable, but how you approach them early with transparency and thorough preparation. So that's what really defines the outcome. And that mindset, it sets the tone for how all defence projects should operate.
All right, folks, as we've been discussing, preparation and collaboration are key to success. To wrap up this week, we've got just a few quick reminders for you.
Yes, first make sure you complete the quiz on the lesson webpage. It's designed to reinforce the key points we covered, and trust me, it's worth the time.
Definitely. And don't forget the scenario-based exercise. Those are always great for applying these ideas to real-world situations. Oh, and jump into the forum to share your outcomes. It's always interesting to hear how everyone approaches the same challenges differently.
Precisely. Collaboration and shared learning are what make these exercises most valuable. Also, we genuinely love your feedback on how the lesson worked for you. Your input helps us refine these sessions and make them as useful as possible.
And hey, if you're enjoying the course, why not recommend it to someone else in defence infrastructure? Sharing it around helps us grow the community and, make this knowledge available to more people.
Absolutely. With that, we'll call it a day. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you back for the next episode of Mastering Defence Infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Take care and see you next time.